Hello everybody, welcome back to Film Fiction. Today we are looking at a story called We Don't Go Past the Garden Wall, and we might do another depending on how this goes. But yeah, it's a short story. This one here in particular isn't too long. I haven't done any warm-ups, so we'll see if voices sound alright or not. We're kind of just jumping in blind. So, might I have a bit of earth? We don't go past the garden wall. I read it because of the Cartoon Network show it reminded me of. Wanted to read it. It was mantra repeated ad nauseum by the family for years. Granny Smith had said it to their mother, who said it to Applejack, who now said it to Applebloom. But she didn't just say it, she yelled it. Tears were welling up in Applebloom's eyes. Her muddy hooves were rapidly drying, leaving crusty blotches on the carpet. But why, sis? Because you don't, Applejack shouted. You just don't. She's very aggressive. The tears spilled freely now, and a whimper started at Applebloom's throat. It tugged at her heartstrings. She tried to stay firm, but after a moment, Applejack's face softened, kneeling down. She hugged her sister. "It's okay," she said softer. "I'm not mad. I mean, I am, but," she sighed, "I'm trying to keep you safe. There's things you need to stay out of. Someday you'll understand, but for now, you just listen to me, okay?" Applebloom bit her lip and nodded, downcast. Sometimes it was hard to tell when a lesson had truly sunk in, or if the forbidding would only serve to foster yet more curiosity, but Applejack knew her sister well enough to know that it had stuck, at least for now. It helped that she rarely yelled. "Come on, Sugar Cube, let's get you cleaned up for dinner." Deep in the thicket, black moss and thorny vines lay in thick tangles. Beneath the prickly barrier, tall stone walls stood in decay, hasty construction worn and bending under decades of neglect. Applejack stared at the wall. It had been years since the first day she'd gone over. The stones had been straighter then, the vines thinner. But she still remembered it like yesterday. She didn't fully understand it, how it had started, how it still persisted. Just that one day she was part of it. Against her better judgment, she wandered around the perimeter of the garden. Applebloom's hoofprints were still fresh. Her trademark scarf had come off in the attempt to scale the vines, lying stained and muddy. "Why'd you go looking?" she muttered. "Now I gotta take care of it." She scrubbed hoofprints out with her own and picked up the scarf, then continued around the perimeter. The garden wall was circular, 10 withers high and 200 paces around, built to last, though not long enough. Reaching the far side, she pushed aside a bundle of vines and stared at the ironclad wooden door. It was newer than the rest of the wall, probably only a few decades old, but starting to rot. The lock was even newer, still not rusted from the elements. She'd had to replace it a few years ago. Pony still talked about that night, but less often now. Leaning her head forward, she tipped her hat into one hoof. With her muzzle, she nudged aside the hidden flap and pulled a key out with her teeth. Replacing her hat, she bent down and put the key in the lock. It clicked innocently, and the door swung open. "It's not fair," Applebloom groused, picking at her dinner. "How come she gets to know and I just have to wonder?" Big Mac chewed another bite of grain cake. "Yup." "And she keeps telling me I can know when I'm older. But she's been saying that my whole life. And now I'm older, but she still won't tell me." Big Mac sighed. It was the same every year. Around this time, the curiosity, the snooping and sneaking, it was like an invisible force pulling the filly to places she shouldn't be, places that only led to pain, so little as he knew. That might have been a typo, I'm not sure. Oh, never mind, I guess not. He thought for a moment before opening his mouth. "Look here, little sis, it chews me up too. But your sister and Granny know best, so you just listen to them until they say otherwise, you hear?" Apple Bloom looked at her brother in silence. He was a pony of few words, so she knew the ones he did utter were important, and the ones he didn't say even more so. You don't know, do you? She asked after a moment. Nope. She hasn't told you. Nope. Now that made her head spin, at a loss for words. She turned her attention back to her half-eaten dinner, buttered grain cakes and mashed potatoes with thick slices of juicy apples on the side. On the far side of the table, Applejack's own plate lay untouched. Applejack stared into the hollowed-out darkness of the ancient tree trunk, sitting in the middle of the circular garden. It was short and stout, but at least 4 pony lengths wide. Thump. No, it's just me. Thump. Look, you gotta stop with this. I know things have been good for us, but I'm more than willing to just cut loose and take our chances if you don't behave. Thump. She sighed and glanced up at the moon, shrouded in clouds. I know. Her voice raised in pitch and volume. But a deal's a deal. You had Granny, and now you've got me. But she's off limits, you hear? Silence. All right. Suppressing a shudder, Applejack walked into the hollow. It took her eyes a minute to adjust, though she would have preferred to keep them closed. Thump! The withered black heart in the center of the bleached white rib cage pulsed again, angry. Applejack glanced around the interior of the empty trunk, trying not to look at a rotted pastel shape deep in the shadows. Quickly, she found a blade on the makeshift table. With barely a wince, she opened a small vein and held her hoof out. 1 drop, 2, 5. A steady dribble now. The heart spasmed and throbbed, growing red and full. All right, that's enough for now, Applejack said. She found the roll of bandages and closed the wound efficiently, then set them back on the table. Thump, thump. Feeling a little faint, she stumbled out of the hollow tree. It took a moment to catch her breath. She'd have to hide the wound, make an excuse for the fresh hollows under her eyes, visit Rarity for yet more makeup to hide the fact that she somehow looked years beyond her age. It didn't want the stallions for some reason, just the mares, just like Granny, just like her mother, who hadn't been careful enough, just like that random filly who'd wandered off into the Everfree one day and never came back. Coincidentally, one of their best years. Sometimes she wondered if it was worth it. Then she looked up and watched a bushel of perfect beautiful apples sprout from the dead branches. Clap, 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 clap. Okay, so that is interesting. So what I'm understanding is this is the true story on, well, maybe not the truest story, but I'm guessing this has to do in this universe, this AU, the, how Pear Butter and maybe Bright Mac possibly died. But I believe Pear Butter probably somehow died from this thing or something or whatever. So you give it a sacrifice, this thing in the woods, and then in exchange, it gives your land vitality and growth. And giving you a good harvest. Which is weird. But I like it. I'm feeling up for it, so I'll go ahead and read the next one. Is that it? What was it for? This is a sequel created by Flashgen. This story is a sequel to We Don't Go Past the Garden Wall. Years pass by too fast. Applejack grows older, but as she always has, she stays strong for her family, but the heart yet hungers. How long can she keep going alone? How long until her veins run dry? And if she stops, what was all of it for? Ooh. We got a mystery on our hands, on our hooves. I wonder if I can change the colors. By the way, I intend for these videos to more so be about, like, white noise. You just kind of play it in the back of your ear or something when you're doing something else. Yeah, we'll do solar. We'll just keep it green. What was it for? Howdy, y'all! Applejack called out to the crowd, a reply of hoots, hollers, and hoof stomps echoing back. She stood on a stage, looking out at the assembled members of the Apple family. It took minutes for the ruckus to die down, even as she waved a hoof over them. As it did, she rubbed one ear with a hoof and shook her head. I swear y'all get louder every single year. Least I know my hearing ain't gone yet. In the laughter that followed, Applejack took a moment to scan the crowd of cousins, uncles, aunts, great aunts, multitudes of greats beyond, and of course her siblings and friends. The crowd didn't always grow, but Applejack could appreciate it all the same. Welcome to another Apple family reunion. Can't say I know what number it is, but I don't think hardly anyone would know at this point. Yeah, I'm not trying too hard with an Applejack impression, by the way, if that wasn't obvious. or any of them right now. Man. Applejack let out a nervous chuckle before clearing her throat. But it's another year, and I hope it's been as good for y'all as it has for us. She looked down to the front of the assembled audience, to where Rainbow Dash was seated alongside Apple Bloom, Big Mac, Sugar Belle, and their little Colt Candy Apple. Further back, she could see Twilight standing out from the crowd, though it wasn't easy to miss Pinky's mane either. I know I've kept this real simple before, and I see some of y'all already eyeing the catering, but give me a moment. She laughed at a playful jeers from the back. It's been a lot of years with these reunions and one or two without, and I know there's gonna be plenty more, but we only got so much time together. There's only so many years of our lives, and those years only got so many months. And there's only so many days in those, and even if this is only a hoofful of those days we'll have together, I'm mighty glad we'll have 'em. A light smattering of applause followed. Applejack felt the throbbing in her forehead. She clenched her eyes shut, taking a deep breath as the pounding of her heart filled her ears. Thump. When she opened them, she had to wipe away tears, and for years before the ones we have, our family has been pouring their hearts into the land, their blood, sweat, and tears. Quite literally. And we've reaped the bounty of it, but that don't mean we're ones to sit idle. There was a chorus of hums and uh-huhs from the older members of the audience, along with the boisterous yup from her brother. Thump. We still plant the seeds for those that'll come after us, that'll remember us, that'll keep carrying on. The thump. So the frickin' heart thing is somehow, like, affecting her. The throbbing in her forehead grew. Applejack's eyes drifted towards the orchard until she shook her head and focused once more on the crowd. But this is getting more sentimental than Granny Smith would have been able to stand. How about we get this shindig started? She let out a sharp whistle, and the more musically inclined of her kin on the stage began to play. Even as the din of the crowd rose with music, Applejack could still hear the beat below it. Thump, thump, thump. So Granny Smith died. Granny Smith died to the heart thingy. Just as probably Applejack here will. It's great to see you, Fritter, Applejack said as she broke the hug. Pulling away from her cousin seated at one of the tables on the edge of the orchard, Applejack greeted and mingled with family members from far and wide. As Apple Fritter talked about her youngest, Applejack leaned back in her seat inside, sipping at a cold glass of lemonade. She let her gaze slip to the side where, not far away, Big Mac and Sugar Belle were talking to Cherry Blossom. After a moment they turned, calling out Apple Fritter's name over the din of the crowd, and a quick goodbye was exchanged. Are you sure you're feeling all right, sis? Wait, who said that? Who said that? Fritters, I don't know. I don't know who said that. Thump. Applejack jumped in her seat into the hoof just above her shoulder. She pivoted toward the voice, laughing as she held her chest with the hoof. Heavens, girl, you're gonna scare me the other half to death. After a laugh and a deep breath, Applejack shook her head. Don't you worry none. I was just having a bit of a headache earlier. Nothing that won't go away. It was Apple Bloom. Apple Bloom moved her hoof back and forth on Applejack's shoulder. Honest? Applejack rolled her eyes. Honest. Apple Bloom smiled before looking up and calling out to Bab Seed, who wandered over to talk with them. Her business was the first thing on her lips, but as the subject wandered into her, and Apple Bloom reminiscing, Applejack let her mind wander. Hoof tapping idly to the music, she looked out over the crowd and recounted the familiar faces matching them to the RSVPs that had come in the weeks prior. The thump. Then she thought about the names that hadn't replied, the faces that weren't there, the kin that didn't have the chance to come. She thought of the funerals months prior, the shuddering gasps, the pain, tears, the embraces that should have lasted longer, the words she should have said. Applejack? Apple Bloom was nudging her shoulder. Babseed was gone. Her chest felt tight and her throat dry. Her cheeks were wet. Applejack quickly sniffed and wiped away what tears there were. Sour, sis. Guess I didn't get all that sentimentality out of me during that speech. She grabbed her glass, chugging the reminder of the lemonade to parch her throat. If you need a break, we can head inside. Apple Bloom nudged her head towards the farmhouse, which ponies were filtering in and out of. Applejack saw a few fillies meandering about with Candy Apple. Thump. And miss out on meeting every pony? Not a chance! Applejack tried to ignore the growing throb in her forehead, the beating of the heart in her ear, the nagging, gnawing dread that had built over the past year. The thump. As another cousin approached, it faded into the background, ignorable, but not escapable. Okay, that's a strong little first half here. You learned a lot about that. So, how many members of the Apple family have died? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Excuse me, I need to take a drink real quick. All right. So, nights later, the reunion had ended. Applejack sat upstairs at her desk. The gentle, tinny strums of a guitar filtered up from the record player downstairs, interrupted by Big Mac's laughter and the patter of hoofsteps. Applejack was poring over the ledgers, looking at the hall for the past few years and seasons. The numbers were steadily dropping. She rubbed a leg with one hoof, feeling the scars hidden just beneath her coat. Looking up, her eyes immediately fell on the darkest part of the orchard. Even with the moon and stars out and the lights strung up on the rows leading out of Sweet Apple Acres, there was only one part of the southern orchard that looked like a pit. A void. The thump. I know, Applejack muttered to herself, the weight of her chest lifting slightly. And I know what I said to you. She knew she was getting on in years. Oh, are they sacrificing years of their life? Hold on, sorry, that's not part of the story. That's just me talking here. Do you give it years of your life in exchange for vitality for the orchard? Weird. She knew that Big Mac and Sugar Bill had a cult. She knew that she and Dash, that she had chosen not to have foals. She knew what it wanted, what it wouldn't accept. Also, I don't know. What the heck was it? I'm blanking now. Oh my gosh. Rainbow Dash and Applejack are a thing in this story. She knew what it wanted, what it wouldn't accept. Applejack thought back to how old she had been when she learned, when she had been asked to hear the old mare out before jumping to conclusions. It hadn't helped, but Applejack came to understand. Was Apple Bloom ready for that? There was a heavy knock on the door. Applejack closed the ledger and swiveled around to face her brother. Still obsessing over them numbers, he asked, rather than asked. You know how I get, Big Mac. I just gotta look out for our future. He let out a curt cough before clearing his throat. Yup. But it don't mean we worry any less. Come on, we'll have all winter to think about that. Your wife's missing you. Applejack blew out the candle and pushed away from the desk, laughing. And she can't come up and say that? I didn't I didn't say just she was missing you. But you know that girl's more stubborn than you. Love that. Love that. Love the Apple family. They're great. As Big Mac walked back downstairs, Applejack stopped at the door, looking back through the window. Darkness has consumed the frame. The thump. The thump. With the glint of light at its edges, in its reflection it throbbed with deep, burning crimson. The farmhouse was dead quiet. Applejack took careful steps, avoiding the floorboards. She knew needed replacing in an attempt not to wake the entire house with a creak. She stopped in the kitchen, pulling a half-full bottle of cider from the fridge before grabbing a lantern by the door. She left it unlit as she stepped outside, looking out at the midnight orchard. Ain't it a bit late for that nightcap? For a nightcap? With a thump. Applejack's breath caught in her throat, and she turned to the voice. Land sakes, Bloom, what the hey are you doing up this late? Apple Bloom sat on a chair by the door, bags under her eyes and cheeks damp. Couldn't sleep, probably the same as you. What'd you got a lantern for? Applejack followed her sister's eyes to the unlit lantern at her side. A mayor can't go for a night stroll out in the orchard without a light. What's Equestria coming to? The two chuckled, and Apple Bloom stood up. Want some company? Applejack knew where she wanted to go, what she had to do. I can manage by myself. It's nothing for you to lose more sleep over. She started to walk away from the house, but stopped when she heard the creak of the porch floorboards. Applejack, come on. I know you don't want to be alone. Don't bottle up to yourself. Pour it out to me. Applejack kicked in the dirt inside. Fine, fine. She looked down at the bottle on her hoof. But get another bottle, just in case, and make it the heavy stuff. Facing the orchard, Applejack heard the door swing on its hinges. She took deep, steady breaths. Thump, thump, the thump. Maybe tonight would be the night. With the lantern at her side lit, Applejack walked leisurely through the orchard with her sister. A cool breeze blew through the trees, the creak of branches and rustling of leaves joining the faint chirping of crickets. Applejack steeled herself with each swig of cider, the sweetness and chill fading to the aftertaste of alcohol. So what's on your mind? Apple Bloom finally asked. The thump. Applejack wanted to blurt it out, but bit it back. What isn't? That isn't in... Yeah, I know. Consarn it. She took a deep breath and sighed. I guess how I'm getting old. Worrying about which apple buck is gonna be the last one. Which harvest I help with is gonna be the last. The thump. What happens when my blood dries up and that thing gets impatient again? Oh no. That last sentence I said was, I'm pretty sure, if you're looking at the screen, that's just a thought they're having. Apple Bloom giggled after taking a swig, wiping the spittle from her chin. Granny was still helping out on the farm tail. The joy quickly left her face. Yeah, but it ain't the same. I know it's stubborn, and I know Big Mac will probably be hitting the wall before I do, but that don't stop me from worrying. That is so sad. It's a cruel thing to say. Doesn't help when I stop seeing some faces at the reunion, faces I grew up with. Double doesn't help when I look at the harvest numbers. The farm's not going under tomorrow, Applejack. I've seen the ledgers too. Applejack took a long swig, stopping herself from draining more than half of what was left. She took a few moments to cough and clear her throat. It's not about tomorrow. It's about 1,000 tomorrows after that, and more after that. The thump. The thump. It's about when that thing stops feeding on me and wants Sugar Bell, wants you, wants any pony that comes near. That was another inside thought as the voices are kicking in for Applejack. We can manage. It's not just the seeds you put in the ground that matter to me, or Candy Apple, or any of those lilies that were galloping around at the reunion. Sweet Apple Acres or the orchards out in Appaloosa, or heck, even the little garden Bab's seeds got on her balcony. They're not just plants and the earth, they're the family that takes care of them. And you and Big Mac and Grady's all done your part to... Applejack could hear the tremor in Apple Bloom's voice, the tears that she was choking back. She pulled herself close to her sister, stopping, not their throat, Trot, my mistake, and holding her tight. Shh, it's all right. Applejack couldn't ignore the tightening in her chest as well, doing her best to hold back her own tears. She had to do what she'd always done, what was necessary for her kin. It took a minute for the sobbing to stop, for Apple Bloom to pull away, but the two sat for a while still. Like I was saying, Apple Bloom started with renewed composure, you've done your part to help us stand on our own. Come hell or high water, we'll be family. We'll be together, and we'll be strong. As Apple Bloom spoke, she looked up at the stars. The thump! The thump! Applejack stared into the darkness of the orchard in her mind. She could see the walls of the garden tumbling down, a rotting gate, a shattered lock. She saw children wandering in and never leaving. She saw the heart grow, fat, hungry, ravenous. And if you leave? Applejack asked, finally tearing her eyes away to look at her sister for a moment in the dim glow of the lantern. It looked like staring into mirrored memory. I've still got the Friendship School, the Crusaders, babysitting Candy Apple, and who knows how many foals there might have years from now. And it's home. It's always been home. I've never really thought of... Apple Bloom looked down at the bottle on her hooves, the label bearing the emblem of Sweet Apple Acres. But even if I do, I'll still be an apple. The thump. The thump. The thump. Applejack clenched her teeth, biting the inside of her cheek. Her lips quivered as she fought the urge, held back what she couldn't take back. The throbbing in her forehead grew as the heart beat like a war drum. For years she'd held back, but part of her knew it was now or never. She relaxed and let out a shuddering exhale. Apple Bloom, I think it's time I showed you something. Dun dun. Dun dun dun. The walk through the orchard to its deepest, darkest recesses took time. The ground had grown uneven over the years, the trunks close and bound together. The canopy was too thick for light to enter it. More than once, Applejack had hit a stray branch and rushed to reach the garden wall, but with Apple Bloom at her side, this trip was too methodical to allow that danger. Soon, the trees gave way to dead grass. Dead grass gave way to dirt, and dirt gave way to the garden wall. Dark moss and thorny vines reinforced its weathering stones. Sorry for the break. I had to do something. They bound together and traveled upwards. The dirty gray stones beneath barely visible in the lantern's light. Applejack turned back to face Apple Bloom. Her sister stared up and down the wall, her face a mixture of fear and wonder. You said not to come here, she whispered, as if she were afraid of being caught. And y'all listen to me. You kept Candy Apple away too. Though he's not that curious a cult, but I want to make sure you really listen to me, okay? The thump, the thump, the thump. The heartbeat grew steady, eager. Apple Bloom stepped closer alongside her sister. She gave a nod, doubt settling on her face. Applejack began to walk slowly along the perimeter, holding the lantern up to light their way. It was a long time ago that Granny told me about it. When you were still a little filly, I had seen her coming out here some nights, and I was curious. She told me it was something important, but also something dangerous. She wouldn't tell me, even though I wouldn't stop asking. They stepped over a pair of fallen stones. A trio of vines had crawled their way through a gap in the wall, reaching out towards the trees, a tiny patch of grass around them, vibrant and green. One night I heard her wake up in the dead of night hurrying out here, and I followed her. I think she knew that I was following her, but I don't think she thought I was brave enough. She went through the gate. She went through the gate. Applejack turned the lantern to the wall, then up to its peak illuminated the tangled canopy of dead branches. I climbed. I just wanted to look, but when I got to the top, I tumbled over. As they continued around the perimeter, they came to a patch of vines that were thinner, fresher. Applejack set the lantern down and pulled them away, revealing a sturdy ironclad door. Pulling off her hat, Applejack pulled back a flap and took out a key. In moments, the door was unlocked. The key and her hat back in their place. She stopped, hoof on the door, and looked at Applebloom. The thump, the thump, the thump. Despite the pounding in her ears, she kept her voice steady and low, as if more than a whisper would spill the secret to everyone. She was just past the gate, and she scrambled to grab me when I hit the ground. I thought she was gonna tear my backside, but she just hugged me tight, like she knew I was gonna start crying. I did, saying sorry over and over and over, but she told me it was all right. She said she was ready to tell me, to show me. Applebloom's doubt had given way to worry, yet she placed a gentle sure hoof on Applejack's own. I trust you, sis, she said softly. Applejack smiled and nodded before pushing the gate open. Inside, the grass was wild and uncut, weeds and vines sprouting from the ground. At the center stood a hollow, dead tree. Its interior was pitch black. Applejack left the lantern at the gate. The thump, the thump, the thump, the thump. The pounding grew louder and faster, and yet Applebloom didn't react. She only stared into the darkness of the tree. Applejack stepped forward, standing between the heart and her sister. This place is important, Applejack repeated Granny's words. It was here before we arrived, even if it took a while for our family to find it, and it helped us. It fed the soil, the trees, the family, and Applejack stumbled, taking a breath to steady herself. And then we fed it. Fed it? Applebloom asked, a rasp in her voice as if she hadn't breathed for moments. Yes, we wanted to feed it for it to give us what we need, and it wants us. Applejack turned to the tree and walked inside. She waited for her eyes to adjust, for Applebloom to follow. The thump, the thump. As soon as Applebloom's hooves crossed the threshold, it made its presence known. The black heart glowed a sinister red, casting crimson shadows on the warm bark of its home. Applebloom gasped, hooves covering her mouth, the half-empty bottle of cider slipping from her grasp. Applejack stared at the heart, at the writhing shells past it that she hoped her sister couldn't see, and then at the knife on the table before them. It doesn't want stallions. Sometimes I wish it did, so that our poor big man could have helped. Applejack held up the knife, sweeping it towards the heart and the gauze and bandages seated on the makeshift table. It wants blood from us, from mares, and in return, she looked back towards the gate up past the stone walls. And in return, it gives us this bounty we'd been thankful for, that's fed and homed us, a place to call home. Applebloom could not tear her eyes away from the heart, still beating in time with Applejack's own, still burning with crimson hunger. Granny Smith fed it, Applejack continued. Her mom fed it, and her mom before that, and Mom? Applebloom looked at Applejack, tears in her eyes. Applejack wanted to shut her eyes, to wish it was a dream, a nightmare that she could wake up from, a choice that she could take back. But Applejack did what she had to, stayed strong like she had to be. She did not look away from her sister. She did not cry. The thump. Yes. And Sugar Belle? Rainbow Dash? Applejack had thought about telling them years ago, but it never seemed right. They wouldn't have the heart for it. They wouldn't be able to stomach it. They weren't. Really. No, I never told him. I never wanted to tell you. I told it that it could have me, but not you. I wanted to keep you away from it forever, but what happens when it's not fed? That's not important. What would it do? Now I'm interested. I can't even bother with an Apple Bloom voice. Applejack felt the heart beat faster, felt her blood run hotter. It'll bleed this land dry. It'll take all of this from us. It already has. I haven't fed it in a year. And look at the harvest. Look at what we're losing. Apple Bloom began to back away, but stopped at the edge of the hollow. This farm, this land isn't us. Applejack, our family isn't this land. Our family? This? She jabbed the knife towards the heart, and then to her leg as she laid it on the table. This is what I've done for our family. What Granny did for our family. What Mom did for our family. It's what we have to do. Will do. Applejack began to move the blade towards familiar scars. Apple Bloom galloped forward, grabbing onto the blade and her sister's hooves. Applejack, please, I just want to talk about it. It's not this thing in family. You are. The thump, the thump, the thump. The heart beat angrily. Applejack growled. I'm doing this for us, for you, for family, for Candy Apple, for his children and their children. They need it. The Apple family needs it. No, it doesn't. Apple Bloom grunted and tugged the knife, flying from their grips and sliding across the dirt. It hit the bottle with a hollow clink. We don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Applejack shoved Apple Bloom away, sending her falling to the ground. She loomed over her sister, face bathed in crimson. If we stop, if this farm shrivels up and dies, if this land becomes barren, what was it for? Apple Bloom coughed, the wind knocked out of her. She crawled along the ground, out of the hollow, into the vibrant garden. Applejack followed her. But if we keep it up, if we pour our blood and sweat and tears into the land, it'll keep us until it's dust. I don't know. She was crying, her voice breaking. Please, Apple Bloom, please trust me. She looked back at the hollow, the heart pulsing red inside. I do, Apple Bloom replied. The thump, the thump, the thump. Applejack smiled as she turned, only to see the lantern flying towards her. On instinct, she dodged and then looked back to see the lantern shatter. The pounding in her ears accelerated. Time slowed. Her breath caught in her throat. Flames burst from the lantern, landing on the bark and heart. Embers spread into the roaring blaze. The heart burned a sickening red. An ear-splitting screech rattled her, still resonating in her head even as she covered her ears. Amidst the growing inferno, black tendrils extended from the heart. They dripped and bubbled like crude oil. One surged towards Apple Bloom. Applejack moved without thinking. She was sent flying back and felt her head hit the stone wall. Applejack awoke to screams. A chorus of dozens of voices carried up into the night. Smoke billowed from beyond the wall. The gate was closed. Apple Bloom stood before her, silhouetted by the inferno that now consumed the gardens. The pounding was gone from her ears. The weight in her chest had lifted, and yet she stared in sorrow as all she'd spilled burned down. What was it for? She muttered to herself. What was it all for? The heart screeched in anguish, flashes of crimson like thunder in the black smoke. Apple Bloom turned to face Applejack, then galloped to embrace her. It was for us. Okay, see, that's a cool scene right there. I just want to say that real quickly. I just imagine Applejack just kind of like subtly waking up from the ground, right? And just having Apple Bloom menacingly stand there while the background is deeply on fire. This would be the perfect time to reveal that Apple Bloom was the main antagonist the whole time. In the frigid northern edges of Yak-Yakistan, tremors rumbled through the earth. In a valley where no hoof had stepped for hundreds of years, an avalanche crashed down the mountainside. In its wake, a lone trunk of pure white wood glistened amidst its surroundings. It would not be seen for years to come, a sign that fertile lands may have been reached. In the deserts of Abyssinia, a thump rippled through the sands. A passing worm turned their body towards it. waiting for the rhythmic echo that would signal prey. When it would arrive days later from a lone rocky outcrop, its partner wave was long since forgotten for more readily available food. A passing traveler would stumble on the outcrop, and the singular tree that adorned its top, bark burnt by the blazing sun overhead. Far off the southern coast of the Hippogriff Kingdom, on a deserted atoll, a singular tree sat with its dead branches swinging in the ocean breeze. A wave would rise up off its coast, crashing onto a distant shore. A lone child who saw its crash would venture to the sea one day and find themselves marooned on that forgotten shore. Amidst the storm, they would find shelter in the tree's husk and warmth within. In an unexplored savanna next to a stagnant pond sat a withered tree. The water would ripple with unheard reverberations sent into the mind of anything that might wander too close. Miles on miles on miles away, visions of paradise would torment the dreams of an aging explorer. On an untrodden cliff overlooking a tumultuous sea stood a hollow oak. Within the black heart of the land beat over it. So there's a bigger picture here. I'm going to be honest, this last little segment here kind of threw me off, but there's a few things I could possibly be thinking of without reading all that again. There's more than one heart out there, or that the consequences of destroying this heart is going to have a whole lot more consequences across the lands. But, that was good, though. I like that. What was it for? That was pretty good. That was by Flashgen. The other one here, created by Caligari87. So if you want to go read that, you know who to look up. So, yeah, folks, thank you all so much for watching that. I enjoyed that. I really didn't try with voices. Usually I would. It's morning. I just woke up. I could care less right now. I'm not in the mood. But, yeah, folks, have a good one. Peace out. Links in the description below, by the way. Don't forget that.